So we're going to talk about why you would be interested in UDL and how you could get started. So what is Universal Design for Learning? Without getting into specifics, I think it's important to recognize that at its heart, UDL is a conceptual shift regarding equitability in education. It changes how we think about including diverse populations, including those who are students with disabilities, those who are gifted, English language learners, diverse students of all kinds. Now I'm going to show you a couple of images to try to make this point. So if you take a look at this one, what we have here are three different people. Apparently somebody who's very tall, somebody who's shorter, and somebody who's quite short, and they're trying to watch a baseball game. And you can see that there's this sort of wood picket fence blocking their view in the outfield. And so they all have found some boxes apparently, and they're standing on these boxes. And you can see that those boxes are providing visual access for two of the three individuals who are trying to watch this baseball game. Now, obviously, the person on the right still does not have access. What this is trying to represent is the concept of equality. Everybody gets the same thing. In educational terms, this might mean an educational setting in which there's good quality teaching and learning, in which there's a good sense of how materials are delivered according to best practices. But those best practices or the high quality teaching and learning experience still isn't going to work for everybody. And so whenever we have this sort of equality, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has access, that everybody is learning at the degree that is appropriate for them. And so we have a different way of thinking about it. This idea of not so much of equality, but of equity, which is about giving to each according to their needs. In this case, we have the same three boxes, but we redistribute them in such a way that everybody has access. The person who needs the most support gets that additional support, the person who needs some support gets that, and the person who doesn't need any support doesn't receive any. In fact, this is the model that UT and most education systems utilize right now. We have things like student disability services, the gifted and the honors program. These sorts of things are designed for those who are on the extremes, who need additional support or other alternatives. And then we have things like tutoring and general programs that are available for those who need a little bit of support. And for people who don't need any support, they're not eligible for a lot of the programs that we have on campus. So that's really what the model typically is. And this is one way to approach equitability. Now this approach to providing equitability has come under challenge in recent years for some conceptual philosophical reasons. Now, one of the issues that we see with this is that basically we're assuming that the student's difference is frankly a problem. So the fact that the kid on the right, for example, is short is an issue that needs to be remediated. He needs to be made, for lack of a better word, more normal, more like the person who doesn't need anything. So we have the emphasis is put on what do we need to do to the student, what do we need to do for the student in order to help them access the curriculum the way that I teach. So the onus, again, is on the student, rather than on changing the learning environment, the learning experience. In Universal Design for Learning, we challenge this concept, and we begin to ask, why are we trying to make people more normal? We know that our students are variable. We know that they're diverse. Why are we investing so much of our time and energy and resource trying to make them more homogeneous? What if we were to create learning experiences, learning environments that are flexible enough that people can be different and still learn? And what we've learned from this approach of providing flexibility and multiplicity in how we represent information, how we give people opportunity to express themselves, how we provide engagement and motivation for our students, is that when we design for people who are on the extremes, we found that what's necessary for some is good for everybody. That this design helps not only the people with disabilities or English language learners or our students who would be in the honors program, etc., but that flexibility makes it so that everybody who was slipping between the cracks that were neither average nor extreme, everybody can learn better, can access content better, learn more about themselves, feel more confident, are more likely to graduate, are more likely to stay in a class, are more likely to get something out of that class that's going to transform who they are and how they perform in their future careers. It's tremendously beneficial to change the way that we design learning experiences instead of trying to homogenize our students. Another way to think about this is that on the left, it's almost like we're saying, not everyone can learn in this course, and that's an unfortunate reality. This is something that we've heard a lot, and I've found in my experience as an educator for over a decade, working with some oftentimes very extreme populations, that people can surprise you. When given opportunities, real opportunities to learn and engage on their own terms, people who we typically would write off is not able to learn or not able to learn this content or this in this class can far surpass our expectations. So though we hear this, I'm not convinced. I think that we need to make sure that we're providing flexible options before we come to that kind of conclusion. In the middle one, it's like we're saying everybody can learn in this course, but some students need more supports than others. And while that can certainly be true, I think that there's a confirmation bias, that we find that when we give additional support, significant supports to students, for example, with learning disabilities, so that they can achieve in chemistry or calculus or whatever the course is that they're struggling with. On the one hand, they make progress, but on the other hand, we're not always doing them a tremendous favor, in that we're teaching them not only chemistry, calculus, whatever, but we're also teaching them to be reliant on others to provide supports for them in how they learn. And the UDL model, on the other hand, we're trying to support not only their access to the content, but their access to learning itself, and learning how they learn, and learning how to be resourceful, and learning how to find what they need to express themselves, how they need, etc., so that they can learn. They learn on their own terms, and they learn how they learn. In this case, it's like we're saying everyone can learn in this course, but not everybody learns the same way. I can design barrier-free learning that benefits everybody. Let me show you a brief video in which some of the folks around the country are talking about the experience of UDL in higher education specifically.
Learning is really a lifelong journey, and when students come to post-secondary, they're incredibly diverse. They have a wide range of strengths and weaknesses, and UDL is really about how to make that learning journey tractable for as many of those learners as possible.
I think UDL is important because of the variability that we have across learners. We often think about individuals with disabilities as individuals at the margins, and that if we can develop or create learning environments for those individuals at either end of the bell curve, we go a long way towards addressing the needs of everyone else in between.
We've seen an enormous growth in interest in using UDL, ranging from individual faculty members wanting to use it, to whole departments, to sometimes whole institutions wanting to adopt it as an approach to really better serving the broad range of students that are on campus.
It is not about faculty being the experts or administrators being the experts, but the ethos of we're all in this together.
In a UDL classroom, I felt like I wasn't, feeling bad because, I didn't participate like another student. I was more so looking at myself and trying to be my best learner.
I think this has really made my learning deeper. It's different to me than lecture-based courses where I sort of hear information, think it's really interesting, but then end up forgetting it down the line.
UDL is really critical for helping faculty feel like they can teach all students, because it's about designing for all students from the outset.
UDL is really about bringing flexibility and options into the environment by design so that students will have the resources that they need to make learning tractable in post-secondary environments.
So lots of great thoughts there in representing this sort of paradigm shift, this conceptual shift. I want to present it one other way. One of my colleagues, Jody Black from the Community College System of Nova Scotia, has talked about this in terms of 4 UDL paradigm shifts. She talks specifically about barriers And we oftentimes could traditionally conceptualize barriers as student problems. So my students are falling asleep in my 8 a.m. class, so they need to, there's a problem with them. They're too lazy. They're not focused enough. They're not driven enough, etc. And to seeing this as an environmental limitation. Teaching college students at 8 a.m. is going to be difficult. What can I do to create more physical activity, engagement, etc., so that they're able to learn despite the fact that their brains aren't quite really kicking in yet, 8 in the morning typically. That sort of conceptual shift. And we talk about the variability of students. Traditionally, we tend to think in terms of static labels. Students with learning disabilities, or normal students, or gifted students, these sort of static labels, as if those aspects of a student define who they are. And in the process, we tend to leave out everybody who doesn't quite fit either in the middle or the extremes. In UDL, we think about gradual, predictable, dynamic variability, in which we have students who are slightly different from others and significantly different from others, but it's predictable. It shouldn't be surprising to me when I have a class of 25, 30, 100 students to recognize that some are going to be motivated by some things and others by other things. That some students are going to learn best when they get to do this with this lesson, and others are going to prefer to learn in this way. Having that kind of variability isn't surprising. To recognize that proactively enables me to design in such a way that I can meet the needs of diverse students simultaneously in the same setting. When we talk about accessibility, we traditionally think of this as provision of access. So a student needs something and I give them that something so that they have access, whether that's a note taker, closed captioning, whatever I'm providing access. UDL expands that by thinking about accessibility not just in terms of something I provide to a student, but in the way that I help develop their expertise so that they can be resourceful, knowledgeable, strategic, able to express themselves effectively, etc. When it comes to disability, we traditionally think in terms of a medical model, where disabilities are inherently bad and hold people back and so forth. Whereas in UDL, we adhere more to the social model of disability, in which we see disability as difference, as neutral, as a product, and it becomes problematic when that disability interacts negatively with an environment that is not flexible. So UDL is clearly a conceptual shift regarding equitability in education, but it's not just a theory. UDL also is grounded in very concrete practice. So we might also say it's a pragmatic shift in how we design learning experiences. So let me give you 4 things that we can begin to do, or ways that we can begin to think and take action related to UDL. First, I suggest it's important for us to design or review curriculum using backwards design. Backwards design is not something that UDL came up with. This is something that's been around for a while. What UDL is a framework, and that's bringing together different concepts and framing them according to what we're learning in neuroscience. So backwards design basically suggests that we look at what is the target objective or outcomes. What will my students know or be able to do as a result of having gone through this lesson, this unit, this course? You can scale at different levels. And then how can I effectively and validly assess this objective? So frequently we have this problem where what we say that we want the students to know or be able to do doesn't clearly match what we're actually assessing them on at the end of the lesson or a unit or a course. And so making sure that those match, making sure that the assessment doesn't entangle unrelated skills. So for example, if I'm teaching an entry-level biology course and we have a unit on deforestation, and at the end of that unit I want to know the degree to which the students have come to understand the effect that deforestation has on ecosystems and the earth as a whole. And so in order to do that, I have them write an essay. Right? Now this is pretty standard. Now the problem is, writing an essay is a whole other set of skills that I have not taught my students and that have nothing to do with their understanding of deforestation and its effects on ecosystems. And so students who are strong essayists are going to be able to express themselves well, and students who are not strong essayists are going to struggle with assignment, even if they're actually very knowledgeable about the topic at hand. And so whenever I can, I want to increase the validity of assessment by providing flexibility in how students express themselves. In this case, for example, I might say, you can write an essay, you can do a presentation, you can create a model and explain it to me. You can do a podcast pretending you're a newscaster in Panama and going through all of the effects of deforestation on that local environment. Whatever you do, here's the rubric. I'm looking for these 4 things. And that enables students to play to their strengths and to more accurately demonstrate that they in fact understand and know and can express the content of the objective. And just an example. And then we want to think about what materials and methods are going to best enable students to be able to accomplish the objective and demonstrate mastery of the objective in the summative assessments. And finally, I'm going to think throughout all of that and think about how I can build flexibility into the experience. We already talked about that a little bit when it comes to the assessment, the summative assessment, but I might also think about how students engage during the learning itself, how I'm representing content, how I'm engaging students in the learning every day, etc., addressing that flexibility, that variability of my students proactively. A second thing is to consider proactively addressing known trouble spots. If this is a course that you've taught before or that has been taught before by others, and we know that there are concepts, assignments, or tasks that students routinely struggle with in the course, then those provide excellent starting points to address that right away. I suggest evaluating what kind of barrier it is. Is this an engagement barrier, a representation barrier, an action and expression barrier? So for example, if we found the students, let's go back to their falling asleep at 8 a.m. That's an engagement barrier, and I would need to address it with an engagement strategy. Or maybe students are just not understanding or retaining the information presented in video lectures. That might be either engagement or representation. Maybe I'm talking too quickly. Maybe students are struggling with the cognitive load of retaining audio content in the verbal lecture, that kind of thing. And so then I might think about how can I represent this information in more ways so that students can retain it better. Am I finding that students really struggle with discussion boards in my course, and their discussion board posts are typically poor quality and forced? That's an action and expression barrier. And I might think about how I can address that using, again, action and expression best practices. You can identify best practices for those 3 types of barriers, which to me cover the whole scope of types of barriers that we experience in the classroom, by using the UDL guidelines. And I'm providing those to you as a handout, as well as a website that you can go to find more information about those and how to use those guidelines to proactively address the barriers that you've identified. I suggest also that you can address established accessibility guidelines and then expand. Well, what do I mean by that? When we talk about accessibility, it's important to recognize that there's always 2 aspects of accessibility: who or what is gaining access and what they're gaining access to. And so when we talk about accessibility, we typically mean people with disabilities are gaining access to physical learning environments and to content. So we talk about accessible classrooms. We're really talking about, is there space for wheelchairs, people on crutches, that kind of thing, to physically access the classroom. And we talk about accessible content, like do we have closed captioning for the deaf and hard of hearing? Do we have PDFs that are accessible, which means can a screen reader read the PDF, for example? That's really just talking about environments and content. With UDL, we expand both ends of that. In UDL, we talk about accessibility as providing access for everybody, including but certainly not limited to students with disabilities. And we talk about providing access, yes, to content, but also to learning and to expert learning. Just because a student can understand that can receive the content of a textbook or lecture, for example, doesn't mean that they're in fact learning and meaningfully retaining that information. And so UDL provides us strategies to enhance the learning for for everybody. And as I've been saying, it also works towards the end game of expert learning, developing student resourcefulness, knowledge, drive, grit, etc. These sort of qualities of the learner. So in UDL, we like to say we're not only teaching chemistry, biology, literature, writing, whatever, we're teaching students how to learn and how they learn and developing that mastery in them as a secondary curriculum. So, addressing established accessibility guidelines, you can do this by drawing from lots of resources on the web, and also OIT has our own accessibility guidelines for things like course materials, online course development, and instructional delivery, and these tend to be very scripted, like when you're developing a Word document, do this, 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 and this. It's very prescriptive. Whereas UDL, as we get into those more complex aspects, is going to require more of a conceptual approach. And we do have some resources for helping you develop course materials and instructional environments using these sort of development guidelines. And of course, as we're going to talk about in a moment, you can also receive support from this. So the third thing is I want to encourage you. I've only got half an hour today, and there's only a tip of the iceberg that I can go through. But there's so much to learn, so much opportunity, and it's scalable. We can start very small and address this assignment, this lesson, this unit, and expand from there. But I want to give you the opportunity for that. So first, I want to make you aware that we've developed an online asynchronous self-paced course related to developing a Canvas course using the principles of UDL. And so if you're using Canvas as a primary vehicle for instruction, I strongly recommend that you check this out as a resource. There's over almost 300 people now have joined this course either through UT or through its public MOOC version since its release in October, and it's gotten lots of positive reviews thus far. You can check it out at tiny.utk.edu/UDL on Canvas. Right now, there's also opportunity to become for UDL course redesign piloting. So basically, I'm looking for a few people who I can start a project with and commit a significant amount of time to working with you in developing or redeveloping a course. This is something that if you're interested in, please contact me after the time that we have together, and I can give you some more details about what that would look like. But as we're taking off with UDL at UT is so critical that I have some people who are willing to go in depth with this so that we have these showcases that others can see and understand just how effective these practices can really be. Of course, you can also just request targeted support, evaluation, or co-development of smaller pieces of a course or materials, etc. with OIT staff. So there's myself, but I'm also part of a larger instructional design team who have been trained and equipped with UDL and accessibility and have other skills as well for material and course design and development. So you can reach out to us just by sending in a help desk ticket at help.utk.edu. And if you specifically want help with UDL, you can do that, or you can reach out to me directly at emore50@utk.edu. So again, I want to thank you for inviting me out here. I'm so excited for the chance to share with you the opportunities that we have for expanding the reach. And what we found for those schools that are practicing UDL, those courses that are practicing UDL in higher ed around the country, is we're seeing greater attention, retention, satisfaction, better course reviews, better instructor evaluations. We're seeing students maintaining and applying the concepts they're learning in classes longer, more thoroughly, and they're finding that they become better learners because they were in a course that taught using UDL. So I invite you to take part of this and to be among our pilot participants, whether if that's a possibility or just asking for support in a small area of your course at this point, that's fine too. But as we work together, I think we're going to make UTK a place that is known for high quality education for all of the variability of our students now and in the future. Thanks so much.